The music industry became completely politicized. I was critical of BLM and Antifa. There was just a giant pile on, and I'd been made to do this apology, which was a total embarrassment to me. I wanted to break down, but I also wanted to really hurt that person. This heinous crime.
What you were getting, one in Mumford Sons, was more political, wasn't it? And it started to get more so over the years.
The reason I had to quit Mumford Sons.
Do you miss it? Tell me the story. You were in Mumford Sons. What kicked off?
Hi, Andrew. Thanks for having me on your show.
No intros.
No intros.
No, it does better.
Do that after, are you?
It does better without intros.
Okay, straight.
I do an intro after for the audio podcast, but on the video, because of the YouTube analytics, bam, first question, and I put the description of everyone,
And presumably this bit's going to be edited out now.
We might not, because maybe this is quite fun, isn't it? We're having banter now. We're having patter.
Look at us bonding, clicking. I was in a band called Mumford Sons, and for 14 years, started the band when I was a teenager. Before that, I was in a bluegrass sleaze rap band and a country band, and sessioning around London in various different little troupes and setups, and whether it was rock and roll, folk or pop or a bit of everything. And it was kind of a bit of a miracle. The band, three very talented, the other talented musicians and songwriters, and made some great records that I'm very proud of, and toured the world, and I had a great time. It was kind of seems like a bit of a miracle. Yeah. It's quite hard to distill 14 years into sort of one quick
It's my least favourite part of the podcast, every episode, because I've got to be like, tell me the thing, and then we can talk about the things.
You've got to set the backdrop, don't you? You've got to tell the story.
Yeah. Me or you? Do you want me to tell it?
No, you don't. One has to. For the listeners. No, as a podcast to myself now.
Yes,
I understand what you're trying to do, and it's smart. It's what we in the YouTube game called setting the scene.
I suppose the music industry is one of those industries, a little bit like publishing, podcasting, TV, media, that are quite close knit and do have a lot of this ideology going on. It's not just that ideology as well. I noticed with music, I just watched the Robbie Williams documentary. Did you see that? I didn't. Parts? It was good. It's
Love
good.
Robbie.
Yeah, he's great. He's a friend. He's my mate now.
Rob's really?
Yeah.
You had him on your show?
Yeah. But there's a bit in the documentary that's so sad because he's going through it, a bad time. He's got like trauma. Like what he went through is mad. And if you only have time to watch one part of the 4-part series, episode 3, it kicks off, and he's just answering questions from the media, and they say, "How are you doing, Rob?" And he's going, "Really bad, awful, depressed, don't want to do this, but I have to because I've signed a contract and I've got to do it the next 30 days, and saying all these things. And then the guy says, can we do it again? And can you just a bit brighter, maybe? So Rob says, do you want me to lie? And he's like, no, not a lie. And he goes, how are you doing, Rob? And Rob goes, yeah, great, really good, really good. I think that's how it goes out. And so obviously that's not a political version of the way that the media might try and fit someone into a bubble. They want them, everything's great, well done, and all that stuff. What you were getting while part of one in Mumford Sons was more political, wasn't it? And it started to get more so over the years.
The reason I had to quit Mumford Sons is because in March 2021, I was tweeting throughout the pandemic about the books I was reading, and one of the books I tweeted about was Andy Ngo, who's American conservative journalist's book about Antifa, documenting the BLM riots of 2020, and the Antifa cells across the states. And there was I only had 3,000 Twitter followers, so this is absolutely insane what happened, but there was just a giant pile on, and then including a lot of musicians that I'd worked with before, some of whom had my phone number and yet decided to be part of that pile on instead of calling me. I know I make a point, I'll never attack anyone on Twitter if I've got their phone number.
Interesting.
Because I'm like, I can always just address them, or I won't write articles about people if I can contact them directly.
My only concern with that is that doesn't that then create a sort of level, and I know that's not the intention, of protection for those who are in contact with media, members of the media, so then they'll be protected because they'll just get a private message, whereas people who don't have those contacts will just get slaughtered in the press.
Yeah, but although I'm not the press, so I think it's just, that's a possible consequence, but I think as out of etiquette, I think that if I've got someone's number...
Well, they backstab
I also say I do as much as I can to resist ad hominem, whoever it is.
Yeah.
I make some exceptions, like for Sadiq Khan, who he's run my city into the ground, but that's another conversation. But apart from that, I try my best to avoid ad hominem where I can. But yeah, I think having seen a lot of these people like pile on when they could have contacted me personally, I was like quite shocked by that. So I wouldn't want to do that to someone else, even when I see often people I know making or doing things I disagree with, let's say. So the pile-on was political because I by extension was critical of BLM and Antifa. BLM was supported unquestioningly by the music industry, despite what was written on their website being anti-family, anti-capitalist, being pro-Marxist. I'd read all the BLM literature long before Patrisse Khan-Cullors, all of that, and it's explicitly Marxist, and a pure evil doctrine as far as I'm concerned.
Anti-Zionist.
They were. What's interesting now is that a lot of my progressive Jewish friends are suddenly realizing how terrible this woke stuff is because they've turned on them. But they were anti-Zionist. Some of the BLM leaders in Britain were on pro-Palestine, anti-Israel marches back in 2020 and 2021. Like this isn't like a revelation. Like this was always clear what they stood on Israel.
Yeah.
And like being anti-colonialist. What do you think that means? Like they literally meant that.
Yeah.
And so anyway, this is maybe this is my problem for like reading things too much, or like. But anyway, reading things has got me in trouble.
You're like a mad reader, though, aren't you? You're like known as like the guy who reads loads of books. Like your house is apparently filled with books. And
I try to. I there's definitely I don't read enough. But I like to look into things before I support them.
How many books do you read in a year? I only asked because the trigonometry guys were saying that they couldn't move around your house for books everywhere.
I try and get through 50 pages a day just to
That's like a hefty amount.
Yeah, but I mean, in the lockdown, I was reading a few a week. And touring, there were some tours where I could read a book a day because you're just waiting 12 hours for showtime. And that was awesome, actually. I kind of got my education touring. Particularly after I stopped drinking, because then I really had a lot of time. Before then, I was just recovering from the night before. I criticized BLM. This thing blew up, and then there was just a total pile on. They kept coming after the band. By the end of the weekend, it was a segment on The View and Tucker, and I wasn't used to that stuff because I'd not really gone into the media game. I was just doing. I was music. I was in the band. That was like a whole world. Even though there was a sort of odd relationship with media and things being, written about our albums over the 15 years, whatever. But I'd never seen that side of media, and for me to continue in the band was untenable. If I expressed my opinions, it was hurting them, but at the same time, I'd been made to do this apology, which was was a total embarrassment to me, and so it was the only way out for me. So anyway, I cleared my conscience, and they're fine. So it's kind of it worked out. But it might be the case that particular period, like 2020, 2021, we were all locked up. COVID had turned us all mad. Yeah. There was all of these marches going on, whether it was BLM or there was anti-lockdown marches. The only ones I went to were the pro-Hong Kong marches and a couple of Uyghur marches, but they weren't well attended.
Just you running around save the Uyghurs.
Save the Uyghurs.
Man.
I think at the most there was 25 of us at one Uyghur protest. Wow. That's one particular issue. You'd have hoped that more Muslims would have stood by. Some did, but very few.
They don't care.
I don't think they care that much, no. And another thing about the Uyghurs, I did some work on the Uyghur stuff. And there was the Uyghur Tribunal, which was in 2020, I think it was end of 2020, or maybe it was 2021, at Church House in Westminster, and half the room were Jews. So when Muslims are actually being genocided, as they are in Xinjiang in Western China, the Jews are there in solidarity.
Yeah.
And that's what hurt me so much. I actually didn't finish the story that we were in the beginning of this conversation, which was that on October 9th, I think it was, I went to the Israel Vigil on Whitehall, and as described earlier, there were celebrations at the Israel Embassy. I think it was in Kensington or wherever it is in London. But on the tube home, I was confronted by some people returning from that event, and they had their keffirs on, and they were, chests puffed out, sauntering jubilantly, let's say that way, on the tube. And part of me, I saw this, and I wanted to break down, but I also wanted to really hurt that person. And I didn't. I resisted. But the anger I felt, that's the response, of this heinous crime. I'm very concerned about the state of our country, and
no, but it's a really interesting point, because I think what we've got here is blokes, and there are blokes like that, blokes on a night out, and then you've got these blokes who are also radicalized far-right religious people, right? They're as far-right as it gets, really, with some beliefs. If we're talking about people who are extreme Muslims, really quite far, but who are enabled by a very strong far-left at the moment to basically do what they want, and to somehow come out of it righteous, as the righteous ones. So when you've got that mix of sort of testosterone out on a rally, we all know what, we've been to football games and stuff, what happens, what kicks off. Stadiums and rock music and stuff, people really kick off. Weddings, jumping around, pushing everyone. Letting that out.
It's funny that you mentioned the football thing, because speaking to Freddie Sayers of Unheard, who reported in one of the pro-Palestine march, and he said that they were literally singing, "We love you, Gaza, we don't, we love you." So there is a football chant element to it, there is an unholy alliance there, the far right and the far left.
Yeah, if you give people license to go out and be horrible, I think we generally a percentage of us do it, and that's really sad. And but it's reality. It's humans. And I think we got to be worried about that. The lead, Marcus Mumford, wanted you to stay. He said he begged you to stay.
There was no objection when I explained the situation.
But you were quite. I don't know enough about the ins and outs, because I am a big Mumford and Sons fan. I'm not just saying. I know everyone says it to the person, right? But I really do like. But I'm not someone who knows all the names of the members of things. I just don't. So I don't know all that, but you were pretty integral in your role there, weren't you?
I'd like to think so.
to the sound.
I was proud of the songs I contributed, and I put my everything into those songs, even the ones I didn't write. And those guys are incredibly talented. I'm sure they'll be fine without me.
But it's a really unique sound, and the banjo part, I know you played several instruments, but that was a really specific sound. That's why everyone loved that. I just loved that. It was so different, and I know the critics are obviously going to say, "Oh, it's not," but it felt that way to me anyway. He said he begged you to stay, but he also said, it was the same article, I think, he was saying, but white men shouldn't be discussing these things, and that seemed odd to me. What do you think about that?
I'm not going to comment on that, what he said, but that you should interview him, and then you'll get your answer there. But certainly I wasn't begged to stay.
Was that sad for you?
Look, the whole ending was sad to me, but despite that, I think about the 14 years we had together and how amazing that was. And so actually overall it was incredible. So that's kind of where if I do feel sad, that's what I remember how great it was.
Do you miss it?
I love being on stage. I have done some solo gigs since, which I enjoyed, but I prefer doing stuff with a band. And I love being in the studio, and I still go in the studio and make music. So, yeah, those aspects I miss.
I think, though, intellectually, you've got a lot to say. You read a lot. Is there part of you thinking, you know what, that was then, and now I can move on as a podcaster. I can actually, this is where I'm maybe very comfortable.
Well, after it happened, I carried on, in earnest trying music, and I've got a decent amount of songs, and I'm keen to like do something with them, put them out. But the doors were opening for me in this media realm. So I was like, I need to get some wins in.
Yeah.
And so I built up a podcast at the Spectator. I'm now going to be starting a independent solo one, and I'm very excited about it. It went great at the Spectator, and very proud to have their biggest interview and some of their biggest interviews. And I kind of learned the skill. Interviewing isn't as easy as some people might think it is.
As we make it look.
Yeah, exactly. My first few interviews as Spectator, I look back, were not good, but I think I got much better by the end. And okay, well, I've got some exciting new shows new things for 2024. So I'm excited about that. But yeah, no, so I feel like I achieved that doing an independent show. Another thing that my bizarre journey has taken me on is that I'm now surrounded by a lot of these intellectuals, and coming from a music live performance background thing, I've wanting to put together some sort of show. So I'm launching a Festival of Ideas in New York, which will be in May 3rd and 4th, 2024. It's called Dissident Dialogues. And we have, as our headliners, Richard Dawkins, speaking with Ayaan Hirsi Ali in debates, because, as you may or may not know, Ayaan Hirsi Ali is an infidel twice over, having already apostatized from Islam to new atheism. She has now announced her conversion to Christianity. Yeah. So, and Dawkins was once one of a bunch of atheists to pile on her. And so we have them in debate in New York City. We have a bunch of other great speakers, including Konstantin and Francis of Trigonometry. And we have John Bavacki, we have Steven Pinker. It's going to be a big battle of ideas. And Andrew, you should come. It's going to be exciting. But yeah, so I've been leaning into that stuff, and it's kind of, it's a weird, I was listening to a Jordan Peterson podcast, I think it was at the time, and he was like saying, if you feel like you're in a position where you might get cancelled, you need to start building up other parts of your life to like be safe so that you can afford to make that sort of change. And I think that's what he did. I didn't. And maybe my failure is, but I never expected what to have happened. It was like completely bizarre.
But that's fascinating advice, actually.
It is advice.
For anyone listening,
you've been in a similar situation, eh?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I had to throw it away and start talking about this stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
But even now, it's sort of happened again, because my initial YouTube channel, it's the same audio podcast. It's the same umbrella, but the initial YouTube, it got 300,000 subscribers in like 1 year, just bam. And it became something I didn't necessarily set out to do because of audience capture, and it became quite Scientology I love, but Tom Cruise and celebrities and Meghan Markle, and that started, and then when I put out serious things, I got just killed by, if I talked about Israel, if I talked about trans, like from a gender critical perspective, was things that I think fitted into the cult aspect on that channel. It seemed right to me. This is still cult. If you're excommunicating people and people were still commenting, I'm going to unsubscribe now, and you're like, well, you're doing what we've just been talking about for years about Scientology, but you're doing it now about another cult thing. So, but I hope I've done
interesting.
What Jordan,
the Scientology comparison is interesting.
Oh, I think it's a religion. Andrew Doyle wrote that book about the new Puritans. New Puritans, and I think, but the cults as well. And so I think I'm hopefully doing what Jordan said in setting up the separate channel, Heretics. Yeah. To sort of ward off that kind of, oh no, now I'm unemployed.
Yeah, I think that's what I'm also trying to do, and I think it's good advice. It's not obvious to everyone, and here's the other killer: is that most people who get cancelled don't see it coming. Yeah, they don't. Some people I think do, and I think some people actively seek it, and I've come across those. those types. Maybe it's people who are more like disagreeable, high in disagreeability. But I think most people, particularly in the creative industries, I don't think they're high in disagreeability. They're usually high in agreeability, trait agreeableness. I'm actually 80 on agreeableness according to the Big Five, which is much higher. And given my life trajectory, it might appear that I'd be highly disagreeable and a contrarian. And I've been always told I'm a contrarian, which is the horrible Kafka trap, because then to get out of that, you have to deny it, which then only just proves that you are. Yeah. But I'm not. I'm actually high agreeable. But I think I'm high agreeable and also interested in ideas and high intellect, which is not intelligence, but it's interest in ideas.
Yeah.
And then plus being high enthusiasm. So that I think comes across as disagreeable if you're asserting ideas that are different to what's going on. But that's not necessarily disagreeing. But the creative industry, generally speaking, I think it would be high trait openness, high agreeability, and successful people probably high conscientiousness, but not necessarily. And so those types aren't going to be necessarily. They might not see something coming. They might think that they're perfectly safe. But I'd say whether you've got, even if you're in a situation where actually your ideas aren't cancelable, it's a good idea now in 2023 to diversify your portfolio.
You just don't know what it might be. It's what Ricky Gervais says.
Around the corner.
Gervais is like, no one knew that. No one could have said 10 years ago that in 10 years the worst thing you can say on Twitter ever is women don't have penises. Like no one saw that coming. So yeah, I think everybody listening, no matter what your views are, diversify what you're doing, because you could. I get people as like contacting me. I mean, the cancel culture thing, people often make the mistake, I think, of saying, well, J.K. Rowling's doing okay, Graham Linehan's sort of okay, not as much, but okay. They're all doing fine. There's no cancel culture. It's people that you've never heard of. That's the point. And I get emails from people all the time, just like people have been cancelled for saying like the word yid, right? Which is outside the UK, people won't know what that's a reference to, but yid it's a song that Tottenham Hotspur sing. It's a reference to Jews, and some people are very offended by it. I'm Jewish, I'm not offended by it. But people have said it at work in a not in an angry way, but just like, oh, the yids are playing on this day or whatever. Fired, lost their jobs, can't put food on the table.
Really?
Yeah.
Who was fired?
There was a woman who got in touch with me. Just no one knows who she is. Woman got in touch saying, can you help me? I said, I don't know what I can do. I'm really sorry. But her boss fired her because she had sent, I think it was a meme with the ex-Tottenham manager, Pochettino, and it said like Yid Army on it or something like that.
It's a tricky one there. So I had this conversation with Maurice Glassman, who's a Lord Labour peer, and he's very in favor. He thinks that on the Tottenham fans singing Yid Army there is a tradition of endearment. It's them accepting the Jews who had arrived into the East End and then became... and he argues it was a way that they welcomed them, but then on the other side, someone like David Baddiel will argue no, it's actually a slur and not okay. And it's a tricky one with the whole, like, it changes using these kind of words. It's changed so much. Even Joe Rogan got in trouble for using the N-word over again, but there was a period like 10, 15 years ago where that word was losing its punch.
People don't remember that I said that, and everyone just goes mad going, what are you talking about? It was always, and it wasn't as bad to say it.
Comedians were using it and go, you're my N-word, and this was like a thing. And now I would say that was a step in, that signified or signaled that the different communities were coming together because they were able to show that sort of endearment to each other. And so then, now I don't want to use that word, like I don't need to use that word. So I'm not going to like fight to use that word, nor particularly, I'm not a Tottenham fan, so I'm not going to fight to use to use yid either as a word. I think the movement away from that and the kind of these words becoming, what does that say about the state thing? It suggests that there's, or maybe it's either suggesting or encouraging a division between groups again on those racial lines or whatever.
I've had this debate with David Baddiel a couple of times, and I get where he's coming from, because what he's saying is Jews don't count. I know that's the name of his book, but just like, if we're going to apply such sensitivities to everyone else, why not also to Jews who might be offended by the word? And I say I totally get that. I would come at it from a different angle and say none of them should be as sensitive. I know there's a history of, but it needs to be, at least in my opinion, about intent. And if somebody had shared a meme of Pochettino, the manager of the team, with the name in it, that's not somebody looking to cause harm. I know there were blurred lines then, and it becomes difficult to adjudicate. How do you, was there? And I think we need clear-cut cases of somebody with intent trying to hurt someone's feelings by using a word, rather than like singing along to a rap song, chanting something in a stadium. So that's where David and I think, disagree a little bit. I think everything needs to be a little bit less sensitive.
Yeah, and there's that girl in Liverpool who was arrested and charged for writing Snoop Dogg lyrics on her Instagram page, and she had to wear a tag around her ankle for however many months.
My God.
So it's a serious thing. I think the problem that Badil makes is the argument in his book seems to me to have been in Jews Don't Count. The progressive ideas of identity politics are good, but
yeah, that's it.
Look, it doesn't seem to apply to the Jews, where I would go, no, those progressive ideas, splitting up identity groups, are not good. And it was always clear, as I've said already in this conversation, that it would end up with the Jews being singled out and anti-Semitism arising.
That's the point that Elon Musk is trying to make. And he said something which I think was a really clumsy use of words, where he seemed to agree that the Jews were at fault for what's going on with a lot of the woke ideology and stuff like that. And he clarified later that no, it's just that a lot of them agreed with something, even though it was clear that later down the line it was going to come back to bite them. And I don't see him as an anti-Semite at all, but he got called anti-Semitic, of course. We've got to a stage as well now. What do you think about this? That silence is violence. You're not allowed to not have a political opinion. That's bad as well now.
Well, silence is violence until actual violence comes up, and then it's righteous. This is like, none of it makes sense to me. It's all virtue signaling nonsense. Yeah,
and you were saying as well that, from 2015 to 2018, questions and interviews had gone from, what's your favourite, I don't know what, to politics.
Yeah, for sure. It happened particularly like after Trump came in. Everyone became politicized. And I actually think it's a good thing that people care about politics, because I think everyone should be engaged. It's almost like there's a civic duty to care about. It shows that they care about their country, which is great. But it got to a point where things which were not at all political became political. And there's never any politics as far as I was concerned in the music we made. But those were the only, I was exaggerating a little bit. They asked a little bit about the music, obviously, but it got to a point where, they seemed to be more interested in talking politics in all the press junkets and interviews we did. And there's a time and a place for it, but it wasn't relevant to the art we were making. So it's sort of totally bizarre. It's just a sign of the times, and it's a shame. So that's the period that the music industry became completely politicized. Again, nothing wrong with being political, but where it's not relevant to the art, what's the point?
And you expected to say one specific thing. Louise Distress, who was on yesterday, she's cancelled in many respects. She's a leftist protest singer. I think she doesn't like being described as that, but she very much is that, and sort of punk music and anarchy, and that's the kind of vibe that she's often about. And when she was asked who's her favourite politician, anarchists are not really supposed to have those. So she was like, they're all terrible, and they actually pushed her. She got an email later saying, look, the publishers of the whatever newspaper it was, publication, aren't really happy with that answer, and can you just say Jeremy Corbyn?
Wow.
Yeah,
unbelievable. I had an experience. I'm just reminded. Sometimes that stuff seems so distant that it's like, oh, maybe things are better. But I put out a Christmas song last year with Ariel Pink called Rudolph's Laptop. It was a Christmas song about Hunter Biden's laptop, and the music press that covered it was so embarrassing for them. And hilarious. So, for example, Consequence of the Sound did an article saying I won't get the exact line, but it was something like the fictitious story about Hunter Biden's laptop this is as fictitious as the story about Hunter Biden's laptop. This is the bubble they live in. They
think it's not even a real story.
They don't even think Hunter Biden's laptop's real.
They don't think he has a laptop.
Yeah, I don't know what their thing is, but that's like how far off. And then they're, happy to bandy words around like fascist and all of this and it just shows how completely deranged they are, that they write this stuff, and even the New York Times concedes now that Hunter Biden's laptops, that's a real and significant story. Hunter Biden's he's just been indicted. He's could end up in prison for like 18 years.
Do you get an apology?
Of course I'm not going to get an apology from them. I think it just sort of proves a point. Like, everyone who's paying attention sees what's going on and sees how, I mean, the music press, there are some nice people in music journalism, so and some good people and some good individuals, but I think it seems to be overpopulated by music lovers who are resentful that they themselves weren't musicians.
100%. 100%.
So they don't like successful people unless the successful people have the right background or tick the right boxes, and use the little power they have to pull them down instead of lifting them up, or just ignoring. There's a great English singer called Beads on Toast, folk singer, and he had this great saying, it's like, celebrate or ignore. I think one of his albums was Celebrate or Ignore, which is a great attitude to have. If you don't like a piece of art, you don't have to shit on it. Someone's worked really hard on it. Just ignore it.
Do we need criticism, though? Do we need literary criticism? Do we need movie critics? I use Rotten Tomatoes and I see, okay, this is 40%. I'm probably not going to enjoy it. Maybe that's unfair. Do we need people to sort of pan things and criticize?
Possibly, but I mean, and another interesting thing that happened this year was the way that Oliver Anthony was treated. And Oliver Anthony's an American singer from the Appalachian Mountains somewhere, big red beard, and in the space of 3 days, he recorded a song, did a video of this called Rich Men North of Richmond, and over 2 or 3 days, it just skyrocketed. He went from an absolute unheard of nobody to top of the charts, and not just the iTunes charts, which you can get up with like 10,000 iTunes downloads, the Billboard charts. He went to the top, and then all the rest of his songs as well filled up the charts. It was an unbelievable story, and the music press just came after him because they coded it as right wing, and so they were like, here we have a working class boy who's a pure talent, remarkable, like, this is the spirit of Guthrie back. You got to watch this video. It's completely compelling, and wow. They just completely shout on him. Another thing and Rolling Stone I don't know what's happened to that rag. It's a disgrace. They used to be the forefront of the counterculture. Now they're just total embarrassment. But they also went after Sound of Freedom, and they said it was a QAnon film. Here's a film telling the story of a man discovering and uncovering pedo rings. This should be if it had the correct actors or the correct director and producers, would be the number one film in Hollywood. It would win all the awards. Instead, because they decided it was right wing, they've just come after the film, called it QAnon conspiracy. Like, you've got to watch this film. I was in floods of tears after. I watched it in a packed cinema. In the States, and after, the whole room just like, everyone was sobbing at the end.
My friend Sean Atwood said that he loved it. He was crying his eyes out.
But then look at the press that covers that film after. They have to tear it down, and I mean, one might then think, what motivations do they have to tear it down? Is it because maybe they're complicit? But that's where the conspiracy theories come up. But I'm not going to jump there yet.
There are also beliefs, I think, that the guy that it's based on, that he was also getting involved in dodgy things.
Well, they're coming after him, and they've been hurling accusations at him. And I don't know if I misread or read that he thinks the CIA are going to come after him. If you watch this film, and you see the way they're coming after him, and it's such an important film. It's really doing God's work, and this guy's doing God's work. You can't help but think, there's like evil here. It's like people are trying to there's other motivations here. It just doesn't add up.
Interesting. There has been there's a thing on the right and left that people don't speak about enough, I think, where the left are seen to be too lenient about too many things, And it does. It's just provable that it does lead to PDF files situations or them being enabled. It's happened loads of times. I talk about one in Berlin, one issue, for example, the Green Party in the 80s and the Kendler experiment, whereby they had too many PDF files and too many young homeless boys. And so they put the young homeless boys to live with the PDF files, thinking like as foster homes, thinking that was a good idea. That's what happens in left-wing extremism. The Green Party in Ireland with Kincora Boys Home and Lord Mountbatten, Dickie Mountbatten, the royal, I think he's Charles's great uncle or uncle, was just free reign to go there. Green Party was letting it happen. So there is a big history of the left, the far left, I should say. I'm not tarring all leftists with this, but the far left, and allowing things to such an extent that thrives. Because of that, the right make it among their first things to attack, because we are tribal and we have a go at each other. But it's the worst thing in the world, so they rightly attack it. Of course, it's a bad thing, PDF files and all this stuff going on. That's where the culture war thing's coming in, and there's a tribal aspect. So what they're really seeing when they see that film is themselves, the left, being attacked, I think. I'm not excusing it. I'm saying where it comes from.
It's very hard for me to put myself in their shoes. If being against, as to use your word, PDF files, and being against minor attracted persons makes me right wing, then I'm right. I'm very happy to be right wing.
Yeah.
And if you're defensive about how pedophiles are being treated, maybe you should put down your phone and just have a little think for a minute, sit in the corner and reassess where you've come to with your ideology.
I know. But I think they're defensive not of the actual thing happening. They're defensive that they are often accused of allowing it to happen. And I think that's where they're getting their backs up and they're going, it's not happening as much as you think and we're not to blame. I don't think they're right. I think that's where that urge to bring down anybody who wants to.
Yeah, okay, well then that's a foolish thing to do, because instead they should lean in and identify those things and make it part of their thing, their tribe, 100%. So to speak, to be against that stuff.
100%. I think that's absolutely
instead of
right.
being defensive, because if you're defensive on that, it's just optics aren't great.
No, and that's one of the last bastions of like unapproachable taboos at the moment. The PDF file situation. The fact that I have to say that on YouTube is ridiculous. And on the left, you have too many people saying, "Oh, let's not talk about it. I'm triggered." And on the right, you have people saying, "Just kill them all." And there's not enough discussion about what to actually do about them. And I think that's one of the things that I think needs to be spoken about by both sides, by everyone, because a lot of kids get abused.
Absolutely.
I don't know.
You should do some more interviews on the issue.
Yeah, I went to Germany and learned German and hung around with. I met loads of these people, the non-offending of these people, to try and understand them. And a lot of them are horrible, unfortunately. Right. So it wasn't great. But what can you do? You went through depression. How are you?
Well, that was a few years ago. I did use that word way back when, and I'm not sure. I haven't reviewed that period of my life yet. But one aspect it was tangled up in, which I probably is a bit clearer in my mind, is my sobriety. I'm actually 5 years sober this weekend.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And I would say the first year of sobriety was the hardest, not only because so I gave up alcohol and drugs all at the same time, and it wasn't just that there's like a chemical, I don't know what goes on inside, some sort of chemical rebalancing, but the first few months is like a massive calm down. And so then it takes a while to come back after that. And then I did that all whilst touring, which is pretty hard going. And I think I made a mistake, if anyone's still listening, if I haven't bored them in this interview, but I think if you're going to try and get sober, the mistake I made was doing it alone and not having like a spot. But I hate all this AA stuff, because for me it's just like reminds you about all that old stuff, and like, whereas my attitude is more like, just don't think about alcohol, move on to other things. But that got quite dark, and so that was a very difficult period. But then after that, once you're out of that, and then the second year, the third year, and then you're kind of, I think, laughing after not laughing, obviously. So it's people go through that for their whole lives. It's a very difficult thing if you're going through that stuff. But my only regret at this point is that I ever drank in the first place. I wonder what I would have done and achieved had I been sober throughout my 20s. I was smashed for a lot of it. Particularly touring, when we were playing on stage, there were periods where I was getting through like a pint of whiskey a gig, and we hit it. I mean, you do burn through it quite quickly when you're on stage, but still, it was heavy going.
Was it fun? Was it fun? I'm wondering if we're taught by people with interest that it is fun to be drunk and out partying a lot. And I know, of course, sometimes it is. For me, it never has been. I don't know why. It might be a genetic thing. Was it fun for you? Was it more fun than just, I don't know, not being drunk and just hanging out somewhere?
I think that I told myself it was fun, but the reality was that I had some issues from my youth that I didn't deal with, and then my issues through my adult life just piled on top of them. And you have a glass of wine at the end of the day, and it does sort out your problems for the day, and then you sleep on it, but then you don't actually address the problems, and you do the same thing, back to work the next day, and then at the end of that day, glass of wine, and then you have all of these issues. So for me, the reasons I gave up drinking, what I thought I was giving up drinking, what I thought I'd find is not what I found. And there was a bunch of stuff that I was like, oh, I didn't even realize that that's kind of what I have never dealt with. And this is why I say to anyone if you're going to try and stop drinking, don't just do a month, because everyone goes, yeah, I can do a month, that I've got my stuff under control. Because what I found is that it's the stuff that comes out after like a year that's really buried down, that if you drink again after a month, you won't get that stuff sorted. So if you can do like a year or two sober, that's much better than a month, because then that stuff comes up. So I'm not sure what your exact question was.
Well, so then can you just have a drink? Because a friend of mine's an alcoholic, and he just can never, ever, ever drink.
I don't drink now, but I just don't. I like another reason why I don't drink now is my life is unbelievably chaotic, and the experience, what happened in 2021, leaving the band, it was so, and everything that, and before that I'd just gone through a divorce, and after that my life is just chaos. And so for me, I want to be completely sober, because one thing I've learned is that you just do not know what's next in life. You do not know what's around the corner. Now, it might be a Bolshevik revolution. It might be that, you're going to get cancelled. Whatever it is, you don't know. And I think being sober and absolutely present and in control in this chaotic world is very important. And it's another reason why actually I've returned to faith in this period as well. The church I go to is high Anglican, and I was actually raised Catholic before losing my faith and been swallowed up by the new atheist movement. But in refining it since, I really like the order of the high Anglican church, because my life is so chaotic. I like that once a week I'm in this extremely formal setting, and it completely realigns me from the week I've just had into the next week. And so I think it's about control at this point. I've dealt with all those issues I had, but now I don't want new issues, and I want to be able to deal with the hell that is life. Not hell. Life is great. God is good, but the turbulent seas of life.
I think, control, obviously, from an evolutionary standpoint, was really important. If you were obsessed with controlling your environment, then you were more likely to survive enough to pass on your genes. And I think that has created in us this need to control that sometimes actually hinders us. Not in what you're talking about, but I had terrible obsessive compulsive disorder when I was a teenager. had to switch on the lights and everything. I had to do all these things. I was like nuts with all that stuff. I really was bad. And it took, again, years and years of therapy as well to come to understand that this was my way of controlling my environment. And one of the beautiful things for me was learning almost to control the idea, or to be relaxed with not being able to control stuff, to be able to just, but I think to do that, you've got to, as you say, have certain like pillars of your life that are in order. I suppose I'm just saying, make your bed, aren't I? I'm trying to sound like really like unique and clever and different. I'm just saying Jordan Peterson's like logo. Yeah. Make your bed. I was upset when you said what he said before. You didn't do his accent, because everyone has to. Like Francis Foster did it when he came on. Yeah. You got it. Can you do a Jordan Peterson?
I can do a Jordan Peterson. Well, actually, I'll tell you a good story about Jordan. Because I've had the pleasure of interviewing him, and
fantastic.
He's been very good to me over the years. I met him back in 2018, and I've had the pleasure of spending time with him. And but he's on it. One of the things is very sweet. And even when you interview him, you ask him a question. You know, I don't know how much prep. It seems like you've done a lot of prep for this interview. When I do prep for an interview, I'm like worried that they won't like the question, so I think I'm like ready to go. With Jordan, he'll answer you so earnestly, and it'll be like a 15-minute answer. So if you write 30 questions, you'll get through 4 of them, and it's 2 hours gone.
You've got to over-prepare in case. Yeah. That's control.
So I was with him, and it was a relaxed atmosphere, and there was for some reason hurling came up, Canadian hurling, and
that's like the broomstick ice sport. Yeah.
Patong on ice.
Yeah.
Someone asked him, I've never heard of hurling. What is that? Patong on ice is the answer. 3-word answer, conversation over. Jordan went into like a 15-minute description. Well, you have this ice, and then you have these brooms. It was so sweet, because he pays so much respect to whoever's around him that he wants to answer honestly. I'm not kidding. It was the most detailed response, and it was kind of like what are the psychological traits of a hurler, and it was fantastic. That's great.
He seems like a really nice guy. And that's why it's so sad that people who don't know who he is, and I've had that, like friends of mine, that guy, that fascist right-wing guy who's horrible. And it's like, every time I've seen him speaking, he's got so much empathy. He starts crying, thinking about the people he wants to help. Like, how is this an evil man? Yeah.
I think that people who demonize him only hear what they want to hear, and they're not really listening. And, or it's also the case that he's dropping a lot of truth bombs, and those truth bombs might be in contention with those people's worldview. And it's much easier to demonize someone and call them than actually contend with those and have to reorganize your own thoughts, which is a much more arduous progress. And I think this ties back maybe to the beginning of the conversation, like how these ideologies have taken over, but it's a painful process to have to tear everything you knew down and rebuild, because that's a long process. And you also in the process have to admit you were wrong, so it takes humility. So I think that's part of the reason why one of the reasons why he's unpopular. But I will attest, he is absolutely wonderful man. When I was launching my party, he graciously gave time to come and which he didn't need to do, and support that. And he's just a loving guy, family man, loves his family, he cares about the world, he wants a better place, and the world is a better place for him. Thank God for him.
It's so funny how you have to prepare differently for different people, because as you say, he does these long answers, so you can just turn up with 4 questions. Obviously, you would still do more in case. Dawkins he's been on twice, and like it's hell, like the fear in me, because, and I love him, but I did like 30 questions instead of like 10, and we got through them in like 10 minutes. And I was panicking, like, what am I going to do for 50 minutes now? I can't. And obviously when you're at home, you can think, what should I, but when you're in the moment and you've got Dawkins looking at you and it's this man who's like scary and clever, I'm sitting there like, oh my God. So aliens, do you reckon there's some aliens? No, I don't think, I wouldn't say, well, yes, but perhaps. Like, what would they look like? Well, I suppose they'd be Darwinian. Is it cooler being a podcaster and YouTuber or Mumford Sons important band member?
Well, is it cooler?
Is it better?
I just met my girlfriend's mother for the first time, and she's not from England, and my girlfriend had to describe to her what it is I do, and she goes, well, he used to be a musician, and obviously her mother was like, oh my God, this is a disaster. What is that long? Oh, it's that long hair tattooed guy. He used to be a musician. Oh, who is my daughter dating? But don't worry, Mum, he's now a YouTuber, which is probably the only thing that's worse.
Oh my God. I come from a Jewish family, so doctor, lawyer, no, YouTuber.
Yeah.
What is that? It's weird, man.
YouTube's amazing. I just saw a poll that it's now overtaken Google as the #1 search engine in the world. So YouTube, and obviously YouTube is owned by Google, so it's not like we're breaking down the monopoly exactly, but it's interesting how people are consuming information now. So actually to be a YouTuber, silly as a name it might be, is actually quite an important thing. Perhaps one might say the cutting edge of media.
There we are. TikTok's really high as well as a search engine. People use TikTok to search for stuff. So that's...
Are you on TikTok, Andrew?
I have a TikTok. I don't know whether to admit this. I don't think I've ever sort of looked at it. People manage it for me, and it does TikToking. It doesn't earn me any revenue, so it just does its thing.
The problem with TikTok is that it is, of course, a CCP psyop.
It could be a problem, yeah.
There's a bit of a problem. I briefly went on and then was like, I can't morally do this. This is bad. I mean, in India, it's been banned for good reason. They realise, and I think it should be the same here. We should definitely ban it. It's intentionally trying to manipulate our children and our teenagers, our youth. And look at the consequences. Look at what's happened in London over the last couple of months. It's because they're on YouTube. That's how they get TikTok. That's how they get their information. They get stuck into these algorithms, and what comes out the other side, it's terrifying.
What kinds of things? Like what is?
Well, I'm particularly referencing the anti-Israel marches that have happened over the last 8 weeks, and you know, I guess things now in 2 months have been sufficiently blurred, maybe by intention, but right at the beginning, October 8th, I was in London. I went to the Israel Vigil on Whitehall. Across town, you'll have seen the footage. There were a bunch of pro-Palestinians who went to the Israel embassy to celebrate. They were setting off flares in celebration. Israel had not responded. So they are there celebrating that horrific shit that we saw. And I mean, obviously I'm not just blaming TikTok for it, but that's part of the bigger picture of what's going on. How is it that these people, these British people, are celebrating the most horrific event on Jews since the Holocaust? It's terrifying to me. And so, okay, what are the other reasons? Well, there's a few other reasons. It's a failure of education from the boomers. I'd say it's the universities to an extent, but I think social media is part of it.
Might be. That's part of the social contagion that's spreading, isn't it?
Quite.
Do you see that thing just the other day? I just mentioned it with Helen Joyce, the presidents of American universities, saying that it would not be considered against their code of conduct for people to chant for the genocide of Jews on their campuses.
It was the head of MIT, the head of Penn, University of Penn, and the head of Harvard. And asked multiple times whether it would be permissible to call for the genocide of Jews. They were yes or no answer under the rules of their universities, and they were unable to give the clear answer, yes, that is forbidden. They have since come out and made wishy-washy videos that seem to be backtracking on their statements, and and by the way, we've got the same problem here. There's a university professor emeritus, I can't remember her name, who said someone should bomb the pro-Israel marches or some sort. No, not pro-Israel marches, a pro-Israel event, a Labour event at Bristol University, and and she's been now sacked. Now, I actually support that, and we can talk about free speech if you want. That inciting violence like that is not free speech. That's absolutely not okay. So the question maybe I ask you is, why is it that we've got to a place where those heads of the biggest universities in America, i.e. the world, are unable to see the racism, especially after 3 or 4 years of claiming to be anti-racist, silences violence and all this BLM nonsense. And yet when it comes to the Jews, those are the answers they gave. And if you're Jewish, then maybe you might have an insight to that. What do you think that is?
I think the Jews are seen in this mode of intersectionality as super white. They see Jews as rich and wealthy and passing as white. I don't think that's right or fair, because the Jews have been the victims of pretty much countless atrocities over the years. So I think that's a huge part of it. And they've just bought into something ideologically, like so far, that they're unable to see where the ideology sometimes needs to just be pushed back a little bit and go, okay, but we need humanity here. And these are real people. And they've lost sight of humanity, as happens with every ideology once ideas become more important than humans. What do you think?
I think you're right in the ideology. I mean, we've seen it pop up a couple of times. Like Whoopi Goldberg's a famous example of this, when she said, well, the Jews aren't a different race. Like, what are you talking about? Have you done any research into the Second World War? Do you not understand what happened there? And it was clear to me that when all this white privilege stuff was coming up, I first started hearing about this stuff in sort of 2016, 2017, and I was living in New York at the time with and surrounded by like liberal elite types, and they were going, yeah, like white privilege is awful, and I've heard this kind of stuff before, like a certain group being privileged when they're not actually privileged. I don't think they picked up on them, but it seemed to me obvious that one of the consequences of this intersectionality, the next step is anti-Semitism. Like, that's absolutely going to come up. And so the ideology is unbelievably deep. That's what we've seen at these major universities.
Yeah, there's a fallacy, isn't there, that people believe that we learned so much about the Nazis, and it was a point you made on trigonometry, actually, that the Nazis are very easy to teach at universities compared to things like communism, which are a bit more complicated and layered. And the intentions in communism seem to be, oh, let's help and let's, whereas the Nazis, it's just so obvious the bad guys for us. And the misconception is, oh, if that were to happen again, it would come that way. But of course it wouldn't, because we're all prepared for it. We know what to look out for with the Nazis, who are the guys just shouting about anyone who's different to them and whatever. This time it's going to come, obviously it's going to come from people who think they're doing good. The Nazis also thought they were doing good, but by it was a standard that we now recognize as evil. So it's impossible for us. That's what needs to be taught at school, doesn't it? That every bad thing that's been done has been done in the name of good.
The thing is that's too complicated to teach.
Yeah.
So but that's why it's also so puzzling then that these heads of these universities, who are supposed to be the most educated of the lot of us, would say what they said, were unable to condemn calling for the genocide of Jews. So then and your show's called Heretics, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so this is interesting. I'm just trying to go into the psychology of the heretic or these presidents. If they're not ideological, like if either they've been captured by an ideology, or they're trying to please the universities themselves. Like, which audience are they playing to? They've only put out their counter video saying, oh, actually, we do criticize the thing, after they had the world come on. Bill Ackman did a tweet about the thing. It's been viewed 105 million times. Like, this is a major, major story.
Yeah.
So they're only now coming out and basically giving these retractions. So
did they apologize? Was there an apology? I haven't heard one.
It's a bizarre statement worth getting into, which I can't remember the details of right now. But okay, so do you think then, are they trying to please the people at the university because they think that do they actually believe what they said, or are they trying to please those people, and are they just trying to fit in? And so this comes back to like the bigger idea of a heretic. Like, most of us want to fit into a group. We want to be part of a group. And I think this is what happens. This is one part of what happens in Nazi Germany, and this is one part of what happened in the Soviet Union. It's not just that good intentions is what leads to evil a lot of the time, but it's also that people just want to fit in. People want to be part of a group. And so they're able to overlook or some of the evil, the small steps towards evil that they're contributing to or they're part of. So I'm just trying to, I haven't really got an answer here, but I want to understand what's going on with those teachers.
I think there's also a level of them being pressured by the vast majority of people. I mean, look, the vast majority of people worldwide are not Jewish. It's like 0.1% of the world's population. So despite the belief that the Jews rule the world or whatever, they actually have very little say at places like the BBC, for example. Despite what people like Nihal says, Jews are outnumbered significantly and really don't have a say, and are a little bit nervous about putting their hand up and saying things because they don't want to be seen as the thing they're being described as, because they feel like if I put my hand up and change things and say, hey, you guys stop treating us this way, that's further proof that we run the shop, that we run the show. So Jews are typically very cautious of doing that. Meanwhile, at these university campuses, you've got flocks of people, just hundreds and maybe thousands, who are protesting against Israel, and who are using words like jihad, and who are using words like, global antifada, is that what it is?
Yeah.
And I think those presidents were wary of saying anything that would mean that they would have to stop those students and be seen to be siding with Israel, and it's still bad.
One thing that resonates there, mentioning Jews not wanting to put their head above the parapet. So I have had emails from very significant people in the music industry who happen to be Jewish, and despite their status within the industry, cannot speak out. And so they'll email me privately because I've written for the Jewish Chronicle and I'm outspoken on this issue.
And you're not Jewish, but you have Jewish descendants.
I have Jewish heritage, but I'm Christian. And they can't speak out because there will be punishment if they do, like professional punishment. And I can't, obviously I would never betray their names because I will betray their confidence rather. But my theory is that, and I don't know if this is exactly true, but if you have a bunch of, the main money makers in pop music is basically 18 to 25-year-old pop singers. And if they are all ardently anti-Zionist, anti-Jewish, anti-Israel, then, and they see, and they are absolutely cutthroat with who they'll work with, they see, oh, so-and-so supported so-and-so, I won't work with them. That's the climate. I was saying we have a mutual friend, again, I won't mention them, who did a podcast with a band recently, and then later he retweeted on his personal Twitter account an article for Unheard. I don't know what the article was, but the fact that it was Unheard, which is a heterodox media outlet, was enough to set off this particular band and say, we don't want you to publish the interview anymore. And so it's a very, like, if you're on that side, it's the end. Where do you want to send people to go? Is a new podcast ready? You can find me on Substack, on YouTube for my new podcast show, and Twitter, Mr. Win Marshall, Instagram, all the social media stuff. I think that's everything. We'll put some links below. Tell me, who is a heretic you admire? Well, we just saw Helen Joyce walk out. Yeah. I'm a huge fan of Helen. She's an incredibly brave woman. Can't believe she walked out angrily like that. She lost something, didn't she? Her keys or something like that. I just pretended she had an argument with us. Can't believe she just walked out. No. What did I miss? No, she had a great... She was lovely. She was wonderful. Was she a heretic you like? Very much so. Yeah, I think that's a good choice. Who's the best heretic you've had on your show? After you. Nice. Yeah. Smooth. I suddenly now can't remember a single person I've interviewed. As far as I'm concerned, this entire show has only been you, Ev, and I think Helen Joyce might have been on at one point. Oh, you are a podcaster. Well, Graham Linehan's cool, isn't he? He's a good guy. Yeah, that was really cool. Just getting to be with, I loved Father Ted growing up and getting to sit with him. That was cool. If I took it before this was called Heretics, it was just On the Edge with Andrew Gold, then obviously Robbie Williams. Robbie's just... Robbie's number one. He's number one. You love Robbie. Yeah. Amanda Knox. Oh, Foxy Knoxy. What was she saying? That was her football name, not because she was attractive, but because she was a wily soccer player. Huh. Didn't know that, did you? I didn't. Okay, everyone thinks it's because she was attractive. Foxy Knoxy. That's why I was using it. Yeah. Yeah. She is. She's good at soccer, is she? Apparently she was good at soccer. She came to a gig once. Wow. But I didn't meet her. She was just kind of knocking about backstage. I don't know what I'd have been interested to talk to her. What do you think? Is she guilty or not? I don't know, but I think not. And I had this conversation. Yes, okay. Sonia Poulton was on yesterday, and we talked about. She's a journalist. She talks a lot about
the McCanns, and she thinks the McCanns, she thinks there was an accident in the apartment of Madeleine McCann, the girl who was abducted potentially. You know what I'm talking about?
Of course I know. Yeah.
Just in case people don't know. She thinks there was an accident, and I said, my point was just like, okay, but you've got to be damn sure, because
she thinks the parents killed McCann,
or
the daughter,
an accident happened.
They hid the child.
That's what she's claiming.
Is there any evidence for that?
She's been down to the site, and I asked her at the time, I don't remember exactly. You'll have to watch the episode. I don't remember exactly what she said, but she went down to the site a couple of times. She really looked into it. She made a documentary about it. I think it was blood found in the room. The sniffer dogs found blood there. There were other kids that weren't abducted, so why just her? There was blood in the car, things like that. And she says the Portuguese police report basically says it. My point to her was like, you've got to be 100%, because if you're wrong, these parents have gone through the worst thing imaginable, just awful. And now they've got people accusing them on top of that. And I just think, and the same with Amanda Knox. If she's innocent and she had to suffer through 4 years of prison, you've got to be damn sure she's guilty to have a go at her online. She's already suffered as an innocent person in prison. That's like being buried alive, being innocent in prison. So I'm siding with the McCanns. I don't know. And
innocent until proven guilty.
I think so.
Yeah, it has to be, isn't it?
Although Knox was proven guilty, but then then it was turned over. Yeah. So
she's been proven
Oh, I think it's so complicated. People should watch that Amanda Knox Netflix
thing.
Yeah,
because I can't remember what happened at the end.
The first half of it sets up that she did it, and the second half then turns it back, and you go, oh, you didn't. But she made this great point, and I've got a book coming out in a few months called The Psychology of Secrets, and it's all about secrets, and keeping secrets and cults and all that stuff. Pam Macmillan, my first book, very exciting.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Oh, and you read those books, so you'll read it. And I made that. There's a great point. She's got it. She's like, it's in the trailer, I think, and she is attractive to look at, of course. And she's got these blue eyes, and she's going, "You're looking at my eyes, but my eyes don't. That's not what." I don't know what she said. Something better than that. Why are you looking at my? And I was looking at her eyes, going like, "Did she do it?" Looking into her eyes, and she's like, "That's not how you do it. You have to find evidence." And people were too, they're sure that she did it without looking at the evidence, because it was just too good of a story.
So I have to watch that again.
There you go. Follow all the links in the thing for Winston's channels. They're great. Podcast, all these things. He's wonderful. Everyone in the whole industry of podcasting loves him. So go and do that. He's had the good grace to come on. And keep watching this channel. We'll put some stuff of my favourite heretics, whichever it is, will be above my finger now. So there you go. Oh, there we are. Put it there. Watch it, please. No, not please. That's desperate. Just watch it. Oh, God. Thanks, man.
Thanks, Andrew.
Oh, you were great.
I spoke incoherently, but...
You spoke coherently, I think.